Hey, it's Red, the creator of this show. The stories you're about to hear are fictional and original works written by me. They often deal with dark subject matter such as trauma, violence, and disturbing imagery, all handled with care, of course, but still intense by nature. Please use discretion when listening. This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Well, look who it is. Howdy, traveler, and welcome back. I didn't expect to see you again so soon, but then again, I guess stories do got a way of calling us home, don't they? Well, go on, get that coat off and take a seat. The fire's still warm. I'm actually glad you came by. I just heard another story. Tell me something, traveler. You ever had a stray dog come up, begging for scraps, tail tucked, looking all half-starved? Did you feed it? Your mama and daddy ever tell you not to name it? You ever wonder why? Well, that's what tonight's story's mostly about. About a girl with a head full of names and a heart big enough to give them all away, whether the world deserved them or not. It started when... Oh, did y'all hear that? Something moving in the brush. We'll be fine, as long as we stay by the fire. Now hush, because we ain't alone out here. Dot loved naming things. She pitied all things without a name and felt even worse for things forced to share the same name. She'd once met a pair of twins back home in Lie Gulch, boys in ragged little suits and matching freckles and sour faces. They didn't have the same name, so why should two wagons both be called Wagons? Didn't seem fair to her. So she named her papa's wagon, Wagon Willie. Mama's brush was Scritchilda, and the wooden doll Papa had made for her was Lucille. She had names for the stones in her boots, too, Prickle, Stubby, and Little Nipper. For the shadow that followed Wagon Willie, that was Long Man. And now, for the stars overhead of Wagon Willie, the bright sisters, the lonely father, and the one-eyed dog. They hadn't slept in a proper bed since they left Lie Gulch, a place of dust and smoke, where the buildings leaned like they were listening, and the only thing taller than the gallows were the lies. For all of its unpleasantries, Dot had found it quite charming, if only for its predictable and familiar dangers. Having grown up there, she knew which dogs were safe to feed and which ones to steer clear of, which kids were nice and which were rotten. She had made friends with the local drunks and most were harmless, and if anyone were to look at her cross, she'd made a point to befriend Sheriff O'Connor and had a mind to involve him in any and all manner of dispute. Yes, indeed, Dot was a very well-accomplished and well-acquainted young lady back in Lie. But now they were heading towards Cherry Hill, a city Dot had never seen, but Papa had described enough times she could almost picture it. Smoke and spires and brass clocks and tall towers, men in slick shoes and stiff collars, women in dresses that didn't make sense in the wind. Everything there had rules and papers and something Papa called regulations, and doors that locked twice. Papa had said they were going to find a better life. He said there'd be music and clean water, a sky big enough to get lost in. He said it with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You're gonna love the hill, baby girl. Cooler weather to play in and more kids your age, Papa had said as he cinched her clothes bag shut. Truth be told, Dot wasn't sold on the idea of Cherry Hill. She didn't much like the idea of so much change coming at her all at once, but she also knew her parents were trying their best, and they were scared. And sometimes, when so much is changing around you, the only thing you can do to help those you care for is to stay the same. So, she kept naming the world, because that's what she did when she was 5 and 6. But now, at 7 and almost 8, time was fast approaching when she'd have to leave all that kid stuff behind. But for now, for this trip, and for Mama and Papa, she could stay a little kid just a little longer.
New stuff to name?
She asked, knowing that would make her Papa feel a little bit better. Mama never was one to say much, but these days she said even less. To Dot, her silence felt like a blanket pulled on too tight, meant to keep her safe, but smothering all the same. Now Mama would look at Papa in quick little glances, like he might break if she stared too long. She held Dot a little too tight at night, like something might come along and snatch her away. And Dot didn't mind. Truth was, she'd been clutching at Lucille a little tighter on the road, too. Once, Mama would have watched Papa on the road to the market, a coy little smile on her face. Now, she watched the road instead, her eyes tracing the endless dirt and sea of bramble bushes that guided them eastward. She didn't look at Papa much anymore. From a hard land of rough riders and bandits to a city of order and civilization, Papa had said. Dot didn't ask why they were leaving. She didn't like the answers grown-ups gave when they were scared. But sometimes, Dot would remember the men who came to the door that last night in the lie, the ones who made her Papa speak in his quiet voice, the ones who smelled of tobacco and whiskey and asked for money that Papa didn't have. She heard the name Tully Varn once, whispered behind a locked door. She didn't like that name, so she gave it to a dead rat she found the next morning. Now, their days were mostly made up of walking or riding or waiting while Papa fixed the goddamn wheel again. Papa named things too, she noticed. Mostly goddamn this or piece of shit that. Papa didn't have much of an imagination. They weren't the only ones who wanted to make the long journey east to Cherry Hill. Most were just too afraid to do it on their own. So they fell in with a caravan, full of quiet people and loud fires. Dot had made the rounds and gotten to know them all, and of course, had done them the favor of giving them all new names. The man who spat all the time, that was Spitty Bill. The woman with the big knife and no eyebrows, she was Sharpie. The boy who bolted like a spooked rabbit whenever she got near, that's Scaredy Cat. And the man with all the maps and no time for smiles was Map Man McFrown. Mama had told her not to talk to the others on her own, but Dot still waved. Waving didn't count as talking, she figured. She waved at everyone, even the desert, its shifting dunes and gliding shadows, even the things that didn't wave back. Most evenings, Dot and her family would join the group by the fire where Music Man would strum his guitar and play him a song, while the families would dance and jive together. That was really the only time Mama and Papa smiled anymore. One night, when the fire was dying low, Dot spotted someone she hadn't noticed yet. How could that have been? She'd met everyone in the caravan over the last few weeks, named them all. How'd she miss this one? The old woman wasn't close to the wagons, not even in the curl of the camp, just barely on the edge of the firelight, sitting like an old forgotten coat come to life. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just stared into her own small fire, which looked more like a pile of angry coals than a proper flame. She looked like she might have been part of the land once, her shawl all threadbare sleeves, her boots wrapped in twine. Her back was bowed like a willow tree that forgot how to stand up straight. Dot tilted her head.
I bet she's got a name,
she whispered to Lucille. She looked back towards the fire where Mama and Papa were dancing. Dot thought about asking for permission, but she figured Mama wouldn't much appreciate her interrupting them. So she did him a kindness and up and left without a word. The music faded behind her as she approached and was replaced with the soft crunch of sand under her toes and the small popping of the stranger's fire. The old girl didn't turn, but Dot felt the weight of her attention anyway. She looked a little like a statue to Dot. She certainly moved like one.
What's your name?
Dot asked, sweet and certain. The woman coughed once, not sick and not rude, just surprised. Don't have one, she said, voice dry as nettle tea. Can't remember a time it was needed. Dot frowned, almost offended.
Well, that's silly. Everyone needs a name.
The woman chuckled, like gravel rolling down a tin roof. Tell that to the wind, little bee. It gets along just fine.
Little bee?
Dot repeated back to the old woman. I seen you buzzing round this camp every night. One end to the other. Never stopped by my fire before, though.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'd have stopped by if I'd seen you sitting here all by your lonesome.
The old woman gave a short grunt and reached for a rusted tin can that sat beside her. The old label peeled away. Dot's eyes went a little wide at what she saw inside. A small pile of what looked like bones clumped together to one side of the can. Tiny ones, sparrow or rat maybe. Dot wasn't sure, but she definitely wasn't going to ask. The woman rattled it once, listening like it was a seashell. "Moving to the city, are you, little bee? More room for buzzing."
Well, that's what Papa says.
"But you don't believe him." Dot felt a little prickle on the back of her neck. Were her feelings so obvious to the old woman? Were they just as obvious to her own parents? It was instinct that made Dot shoot a look back and see Papa sloped over Mama's shoulders, both with a bottle in their hands.
He's trying.
"Folk always try, but that don't change much, young miss."
Have you seen the walled city? Is it as beautiful as they say?
The hooded woman didn't reply right away. She had a look to her like she was thinking real hard about the answer. "I've seen plenty of beauties, missy. Horrors, too. The head has got a bit of both to it." Dot didn't much like that answer, and suddenly, she felt like she didn't like the name of the city either. She didn't know why, but she felt a pit in her belly that wasn't there before.
Will Mama and Papa be happy there?
For the first time, the old woman looked at Dot. Her eyes were all foggy and her face was cracked with wrinkles. But she looked, for a moment, like she was surprised. "Little girl like you shouldn't be worried so much. You let your ma worry about your pa's happiness." Dot clutched Lucille a little tighter, thought a little deeper, though she didn't like thinking so deep. Not because she couldn't, but because she'd always felt the deeper you dig into yourself, the less you see of anyone else. And that always made her feel alone.
Will I be happy there?
"Would you like to find out?" the old woman asked as she shook her can of bones at Dot. She jiggled it a bit, the bones pinged and popped all around in the can. Then she spilled them over the ground. The bones cast bouncing shadows by the firelight. Dot thought they looked strange. Nothing extra odd, but on the cusp of oddness, she supposed. The old woman held her hand out over the spilled bones, rocked back and forth a while, then stopped and pulled her gnarled hand back into her blankets. Dot waited for what felt like a long time, but Mama always did tell her she was too impatient.
Well, what's it mean?
"It's late. Best you go on now."
But you said that...
"Go on. Now. I'll not repeat myself." Lucille slung sadly from Dot's hand. She kicked the ground as she turned to leave. The worst part was, she had already decided to name the old lady. She didn't want to now, but it was done and stuck in her head. So she turned back to the woman and said,
Well, I'm gonna call you Morrow.
Dot expected the little lady to ask her why, but she didn't. Didn't even seem to notice Dot had said anything at all. Dot felt like throwing herself down on the ground amidst the ants and beetles and all manner of creatures of the land to show the old hag just how much she wanted an answer, but she didn't do that. That's kid stuff, and she was letting the kid stuff go, little by little. The little bee pushed a lock of hair back over her ear, tucked Lucille tight under her arm, and turned and made her way back to the wagon circle. Dot's bed was a pile of folded blankets tucked near the wagon wall, beside a crate that still smelled like pears from 2 towns back. She did like that spot, and kind of felt like a nest to her. Mama was brushing her hair with her fingers. They had lost Scritchilda the brush somewhere the 2nd week, or maybe the 3rd. Suddenly, and inexplicably, Dot was struck with one of her bouts of melodrama. She shook her mother's hand from her hair and flung herself back into her lap, arms splayed wide open. Dot pulled in a great big breath and let out an extra long sigh.
You all right?
Her mother asked, a soft smile on her lips.
Yes.
But then she thought about the old woman's words, or lack thereof.
No.
But then she thought about the name the old woman had given her.
And yes.
Sounds confusing.
What's that mean?
It means you're not sure what's what.
Her mother sighed.
Mama,
Dot said, squirming in Mama's lap.
I just feel like my thoughts are spilling all over the place, all jumbled up and messy, like one of them fancy paintings we saw that fella selling.
Mama paused, then laughed through her nose.
So you're confused.
Dot nodded dramatically.
Yes, but in a very serious wibbly-wobbly kind of way.
Mama kept messing with her hair. Not so much brushing it now, more fiddling with it the way that always made Dot feel a little bit better.
You shouldn't go talking to strangers like that.
Dot opened her eyes a crack. She didn't think Mama had seen that.
Yeah, I saw that.
She wasn't a stranger, just somebody nobody named yet.
Mama didn't respond to that, just smoothed her hair again, slower this time.
Sometimes people choose not to have names.
Dot scrunched her nose.
That don't make no sense.
It does to them.
Well, I gave her a name, Morrow.
Why?
'Cause she seems like someone who's always waiting for tomorrow to get here, but tomorrow never comes, you know?
The wagon creaked as Papa stumbled in, getting caught on the tarp and brushing dirt off his coat. He kicked off his boots and his eyelids looked like they weighed 20 pounds. Mama was giving him a look, the kind of look she gave Dot when she'd bent the rules just a little too far. Papa froze, eyes darting between Dot and Mama. What?
Your daughter made a new friend.
Papa kept moving, dropping his suspenders from his shoulders. Oh, well, that's good, Dot. Mama pursed her lips and shook her head.
She made a friend outside of camp.
Papa's posture changed. He stood a little straighter as he rolled up his sleeves. Who? Dot knew it was her turn to talk. She could tell by the way Mama was looking down at her.
Morrow.
Who's Morrow?
Oh, you know, the little old lady on the outskirts of camp. Tends to keep to herself, unless it regards our daughter, apparently,
Mama said. Papa sighed as he undid his pants and stripped down to his long johns. I'll go talk to her in the morning. Dot sat up as Mama shifted and peeked out the flap of the wagon. She was getting worried now. This was the trouble with telling parents things. They scare too easy.
Oh, now would you look at that? Her fire's still burning.
The fire had burned down to a silver belly, pulsing in the dirt like a heart that hadn't yet decided to die. It kept her warm enough, though, with the help of her blankets, that is. Her legs ached like a house left out in the weather too long. Creaks in every joint, hairline fractures in the bones. Even her breath came in little clicks like rusted clockwork. Even breathing had become a chore. Though she was mostly blind, her ears worked fine, and she could hear clumsy footfalls of a man coming her way. Most places she traveled, she managed to glide by unnoticed, with some small exceptions. Cats always managed to see her, which she didn't mind. It was said that cats were the closest thing they had to the other side. Cats and very small children, which is why it surprised her when the little bee took note of her. She seemed a touch too old. "Excuse me, ma'am," the man said, "but I think my daughter might have come over and paid you a visit earlier." He let his words trail off at the end as if it were a question. She could smell the stench of spirits on his breath, even from across the embers. "I just wanted to come over and introduce myself," he said, trying to fill the quiet. "I'm Mitchell Morgan, and my daughter's Dot. You met her already." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Not to him. She heard him shift his weight and scratch his head. "This here's a caravan heading east, and you're welcome to join us, but we don't know you, ma'am. And, well, typically the polite thing to do would be to introduce yourself. Could I get your name?" Even if she could speak to him, he wouldn't know what to do with a name as old as hers. The sounds would only get caught in his throat like a cough that wouldn't fade. Men and women, ignorant be the blessed, and knowledgeable be the cursed. She could feel the man waiting for a response. Probably had his hat to his chest and a false smile on his face, like a beast pretending at civility. But she didn't hate him, not even a little. She pitied him, pitied all his kind, really. They moved through the world like children chasing fireflies, convinced they understood the dark just because they held a flicker of light. So much fear wrapped in pride, so many blind certainties pretending to be truth. He was no threat to her, just a soft, breakable thing wearing borrowed manners and hoping they'd be enough to keep the night from swallowing him whole. Mitchell cleared his throat and it came out dry. "Well, all right then," he said, adjusting his belt like it might anchor him. "Didn't mean no offense, just trying to be neighborly." The fire popped once between them, and she felt his flinch. "Right, I'll leave you to it." She heard his boots drift backwards, but they didn't turn. Didn't want to show his back too fast. But then he was gone. But he left something there next to her, though he didn't know it. It was a hole that cut through the air and hovered above the ground. The void that lingered was filled with his love for his daughter. There was a time she remembered loving, a person maybe, a sound, a sky, the shape of something she once held sacred. But those memories had curdled into outlines, reflections in cracked glass. She could see the shape of herself once, but not enough to know who it had been. Whatever soul lived behind these old ribs now didn't move, just hovered, suspended between dusk and dawn. Her fingers moved of their own accord and reached inside the folds of her coat. It was still there, the gold heart locket. Her fingertips brushed over the inscriptions of old runes that adorned its edge. She couldn't remember the last time she opened it. The girl had called her Morrow. She wanted to ask why, but her lips had been sealed. She had crept too close, and she knew the rules. Morrow, as if a name could save her. Her thumb clicked the locket open, and for the first time in so long, her heart clenched. Emotion came in like a tide. First, a pinprick of heat behind the eyes, then a ripple, and then the flood. Pain, real pain. Not the dull ache of existence between life and death, but the kind that left marks inside. It began with the little bee, the girl she couldn't save, or wouldn't. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Then came the memories. The man dragged from his cellar into the shadows, the mother of 5 screaming for her boy, the neighbors who vanished into the night, the families who walked into the fog and never returned. All of them. Every face, every scream, every plea, every silence. Rushed back in, crashing into the hollow places that she'd left behind. Her chest filled with teeth and stones. She clutched the locket tighter, fingers trembling, unable to shut it now. Couldn't shut it. Wouldn't. This was hers. This is all she had left. Pain, yes, but pain was proof. Proof she still had something. Still was something. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Just air and ache. She wanted to speak, to warn someone. Anyone. Spitty Bill, Sharpie, Scaredy Cat, Map Man McFrown, the Music Man, and the little bee. The name burned on her tongue, tasted like honey and ash. She turned her head to the open desert. The coals pulsed behind her, orange, then red, then gray. The wind was shifting. The brush beyond the wagons began to twitch, alive with the sound of something slithering. Not snake, not human, something else. The shuffling and thumping of 5-digit hands and the clawed hind feet that followed. She watched the earth shift, watched the dark lean in like a very old friend with a secret to tell. Her fingers snapped the locket shut. "It's coming," she meant to say. But the wind took her breath, and she said nothing else, because some truths just weren't allowed to be spoken. It was coming, and she knew it, and she was powerless to stop it. Cursed to be a witness.
Was it not you who agreed to the contract? Was it not you who looked upon the truth of the pattern? Is it not you who looks still.
The words moved like a tide beneath her ribs, old, familiar, and cruel. She had asked to see. She'd begged for it once, back when she believed in something she couldn't name now. Whatever it was a foolish, foolish thing. She had signed the contract in more than blood. She had looked, and looking was the bond. And still she looked. Because she was bound to. Because she chose to. Because she no longer remembered how to close her eyes. When Papa returned, he told Dot not to go talking to strangers again. She had tried to tell him that she wasn't a stranger, that she was a friend. But he wouldn't hear it. He reminded her that this was a dangerous place and that she must be careful, as he had done so many times before. Dot didn't know what she needed to fear from an old lady, even though she thought she was a bit rude by the end of their talk. But she had agreed, if only to let Papa sleep a little better. Then she woke up in the middle of the night, and she woke up thirsty. Her mouth wasn't dry and her throat wasn't itchy, more like empty, like something inside her had been poured out while she slept. The wagon creaked softly as she slipped from the blankets. Mama and Papa were curled like commas facing opposite ends of a sentence. She tucked Lucille under one arm and stepped outside barefoot. The night was cool and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. The fire was low, almost gone, just enough to kiss the bottoms of the wagon wheels in flickering orange. The water wagon sat on the far side of the camp, parked near the dry creek bed where the ground was flat. She walked past the campfire, past Spitty Bill's snoring, past Sharpie's boots, past Scaredy Cat's curled up shadow. The plains opened up to her, bathed in a silver blue that painted everything in dust and ghostlight. The wind whistled as it gently carried ash and sand across the camp. And out there in the dark, something moved. At first she thought it was a bush caught in the wind, but then she noticed the legs that bent in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways. It was hunched, pale and small. Its back was rigid like cracked bark and spotted with patches of yellow grass. A pink desert flower on one shoulder, a baby cactus on the other. There was a shock of fear that made Dot's skin go all goose pimpled, but Dot didn't scream. She tilted her head.
What are you?
She whispered. The thing stopped, and it turned. Its face was almost a face, a little too long, mouth too wide, and those black beady eyes caught the moonlight like spilled oil. It stepped closer, raised its almost snout to sniff her fingertips. She didn't run.
You want a name?
She asked gently, like offering a treat to a stray cat. The thing tilted its head the same way she did.
Pebble.
She whispered with a smile.
You look like a pebble to me.
It blinked, one eye and then the other, slow and separate. Dot smiled.
Do you want to play?
She crouched in the sand and made a little circle with her finger. Pebble watched, the way a dog would watch someone with a slice of meat, then crawled over and touched it. Not with a full-on hand, but something like a finger. Dot giggled. They sat there a while, her drawing shapes and Pebble tracing them behind her. A girl and a thing that should not be. Then there was a sound. A loud crack of something horrible. A cry in the night.
God, get away from that!
Pebble's sweet little face wrinkled back over its skull, distorted by rows and rows of teeth, and it shrieked, loud and piercing, like a blade sliding down the vertebrae of the spine and clicking all the way down. Then a gun went off, probably her daddy's, aimed up at the sky. Pebble dropped to all fours and vanished into the brush so fast it looked like the desert swallowed it. Dot turned. Papa was running towards her. Behind him, torches flared, shouts and confusion, and then the land erupted. And from it came a swarm of creatures that wore the desert surface on their skin. Their eyes glowed through the night, and there were so many, everywhere, all around them. Her father's boots hit the sand like thunder. He didn't shout again. He didn't need to. Dot was already running. Behind them, the brush cracked, like ribs splitting from their cage. Something heavy and wrong was unfolding before Dot's young eyes. The desert woke up. Screams and gunfire ripped the night apart. Loud and close, cracking through the camp like lightning through dry timber. Dot saw torches dropping, rolling in the dust. People running half-dressed and barefoot, dragging children behind them. A man shouted, "Drought!" One of them appeared in the firelight, curled and hunched and knotted and spasming like a dying muscle, a blur of legs and claws and a face too close to human, and little green and yellow pieces of the land running all along its backside. It tore through Mapman McFrown first. He went down like paper in rain. His scream cut short in 3 shattered and gurgling little pieces. Another drought crashed into a wagon, splitting the wood like rotten fruit, near toppling it to its side. Dot screamed and felt herself scooped up. It was her papa, strong and shaken, but holding her to his chest as he ran.
Where's Mama?
She cried. She saw his eyes darting one way and another, heard a woman screaming, but they were all screaming now, and he didn't answer. His mouth was open, but no sound came out except a wild and unmistakably terrified panting. He made the sound she would expect to hear from a child, not her father. All around them the desert shrieked, a dry rasping sound, high and brittle like wind shrilling through shattered teeth, echoing and coming from everywhere. She looked back over Papa's shoulder. Wagons flipped and horses screaming, a woman swinging a frying pan into something Dot couldn't see, then disappearing beneath a blur of balled-up sinew and claws. Then the old woman's fire flared up, white-hot in the distance. Dot saw her, just for a second, standing still amongst the chaos, unmoving, eyes open, glistening tears rolling down her cracked face. And then the world went sideways. Something tore through the brush to their left. Her papa stumbled, thrown off balance, and she slipped from his grasp. He rolled away into the dark, and Dot hit the sand hard, breath torn from her lungs. When she sat up, the world was only bursts of light and noise, screams and gunfire, shadows leaping in the dark. She looked around, spinning and searching, but Papa was gone. The fire at the center of the camp, a bright living thing only moments ago, was out, swallowed whole. The sharp pops of revolver fire echoed through the dark, then fewer, then one by one the flashes of gunfire dwindled down. The screaming stopped next, and soon nothing remained but the wind, the rustling of the dead thicket and bramble bushes. Dot stood alone in the silence, cold air lapping at her skin. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest. The sound of it pounded in her ear. Her ragged breathing was the only other sound in competition. The little bee's mind buzzed away with horrid thoughts of her probably now dead mother, her probably now dead father, the definitely now slaughtered camp. She spun in the darkness, mind full of questions, too afraid to take a step. Which way was which? Where was Lucille? Which way was the right way to go? Then a voice came, faint but clear.
Dot!
Her father's voice. It was distant, but he was alive. Dot spun in place, then froze and waited.
Dot!
He wasn't terribly far. She just needed him to keep calling her. She wanted to cry out to him too, but she didn't dare. She held her breath and willed her feet to move, one after the other, slow at first, but then she ran. She ran as fast as she could, tripping and gasping, and heart snagging on hope. Every step she took made the flesh on the back of her neck tighten even more, the way it does when you can tell you're being watched, the way it does when something chases you in the dark. She had slowed her pace. He had stopped shouting for her. Her breath came ragged. Before her was a dim torch on the ground. Papa's torch. Still warm. Still burning low. She picked it up, but all around her was an ocean of pitch-black night. Then, there, something moved and hunched in the dirt. Pebble. Around its wide and jagged mouth was the wet black of blood that glistened in the torchlight. Lodged between Pebble's front teeth was a long and taut strip of glossy pink flesh. It made a sickening sound as it snapped off. Pebble's teeth clapped together as it chewed the morsel. Below the creature was the bloody and half-eaten face of her father. Where the dark scruff of his beard once rested under his eye was now a shock of bright pink bone and shimmering teeth, surrounded by red meat and ripped tendons. Papa's blood dripped from Pebble's lips onto Papa's forehead. Pebble's eyes caught the light. A soft clicking sound came from the back of Pebble's throat, like he was trying to speak. The sound was wet and uncertain, like a child learning its first words. Dot's eyes filled with tears, and then a hand planted itself beside Pebble. Not a child's hand, not small. Spindly fingers gnarled from an unnaturally long palm. Skin stretched over knotted bone and twisted sinew. A body rising behind it, wide and wrong, limbs bending where they shouldn't, a shape too large for the night to understand, and all along the creature's shape in the dark were fragments of the desert, just like Pebble, only much, much worse. The dual twinkle of oil-black eyes peered out at her from under a thick and wrinkled brow. The torchlight caught only hints of its face, half lost in shadow, half born of nightmare. Not beast, not man. A mistake, pretending at both. Its slack lips dripped with drool, then pulled tight across its terrible face, and 1,000 wrinkles sprouted under its eyes. It folded back on itself like blood-soaked rags. Inside, teeth. So many teeth. Not jagged like those of a beast, but crooked and dull. A collection stolen from graves. From those horrible trembling lips came a sound, a voice, almost human, almost right, almost her papa's.
Dad.
Well, that's all I got for tonight, traveler. Poor little bee. Gave the dark a name, and the dark whispered back. Funny thing about names, once spoken, they stick to a soul like pitch. And once the world knows yours, well, it don't always give it back. Yeah, maybe she did die out there, and maybe she didn't. But some say that if you're wandering the Badlands and you see a little girl staring at nothing, whispering to the dirt, you'd best turn around. 'Cause where she shows up, the drought ain't far behind. Anyway, it's about time to knock off and get some shut-eye. Long day ahead of you tomorrow, isn't it? You made it through all the worst ones thus far. Tomorrow won't be much harder. So breathe easy and wrap that blanket a little tighter. And just remember, not all who wander are lost. So keep your fire burning bright, 'cause you never know who might need it.